The challenge for any democratic society is to provide a forum that is stimulating, provocative, and informative to encourage voters to participate in the electoral process. Tonight, we plan to meet that challenge by providing you an opportunity to listen to 3 candidates who want to serve as the mayor of New York City. Good evening. I am Dennis Walcott, president of the New York Urban League and one of the debate's co-sponsors. Tonight, I have the honor to serve as your moderator. We are here at the beautiful, historic Schomburg Center of the New York Public Library for the first Campaign Finance Board General Election Mayoral Debate. The candidates who will debate the issues tonight are Olga Rodriguez of the Socialist Workers' Party, Ruth Messenger, the Democratic candidate, and Rudy Giuliani, who is running on the Republican and liberal lines. In a moment, you will hear from the candidates. But first, we will have a few words from Father Joseph O'Hare, who is the chairman of the Campaign Finance Board, and in his spare time, he is also the president of Fordham University. Father O'Hare.
Thank you, Dennis. On behalf of the Campaign Finance Board and its staff, I welcome you to the first general election debate for mayoral candidates participating in the New York City Campaign Finance Program. This program, enacted in 1988, is intended to reduce the influence of big money on campaigns and increase the amount of information available to the voters. Candidates who accept the program's limits on contributions and expenditures and agree to observe the disclosure requirements of the program are eligible to receive matching public funds. This year, for the first time, citywide candidates must also agree to a series of debates in order to receive matching funds. Information on the candidates and the debate program can be found in the Voter Guide 1997 edition, published by the Campaign Finance Board, which you will receive in the mail before the general election on November 4. For tonight's debate, the Campaign Finance Board selected New York One, WNYC Radio, El Diario La Prensa, and the New York Urban League as sponsors for this debate. We hope you find it helpful as you make up your mind on Election Day.
Thank you, Father O'Hare. Now for the ground rules. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, which will be followed by a question and answer period with our panel of journalists. This will then be followed by an opportunity for the candidates to pose questions to each other, which will be followed by further questioning from the panel of journalists. The candidates will then have an opportunity for a 2-minute closing statement. The order of each segment had been determined by lot earlier, and the reporters and I will have an opportunity to pose follow-up questions to the candidates. Please hold your applause so that way we can maximize the time for the candidates. Now the opening statements. First will be Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you. The Socialist Workers Campaign presents a working-class voice in this election, and as an airline worker and member of the International Association of Machinists, I and all working people in New York City and around the world are living the effects of a deep-going social and economic crisis. The economic recovery itself rests on the super profits that were amassed by big business through 2 decades of assault on labor. We're living through the steepest decline in our wages in 30 years, while unemployment officially in New York is nearly 10%, twice the national average. But labor is back. Resistance to the effects of this crisis is exploding throughout the world and here in the U.S. There's a real shift in labor resistance to the further decline in our wages and living standards. The victory of the Teamsters in their strike against UPS for full-time jobs and wage increases, along with that of the transit workers in San Francisco to push back the 2-tier wage system, shows that labor has taken the moral high ground and is fighting in the interests of all. The popular rage of thousands in the streets against the brutal torture by New York City cops of Haitian immigrant Abner Louima is another example of this working-class resistance. And the fear in ruling class circles today is that more successful labor struggles will bring the power of labor in on the side of struggles like those against police brutality, for immigrant rights, and for support of women's equality, and against racist oppression. We advocate a break by working people from the twin parties of war, racism, and depression, and advance an action program for a fighting labor movement to confront the crisis. Central to this is the international fight to demand jobs for all, to defend affirmative action and cancel the third world debt. Only a government of workers and farmers will carry out such a program, because only working people have an interest to reorganize society's wealth and priorities to benefit all of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next will be Ms. Messenger.
Good evening. Tonight, New Yorkers will get their first look at Rudy Giuliani and me side by side. One thing's for sure. When you look at the two of us, you know this election isn't a beauty contest. It is, seriously, a contest between two candidates with different styles and different priorities. You'll see a lot of evidence of that tonight. I listen, he bullies. I bring people together, he tears people apart. I care about people, he cares a lot more about himself. Rudy Giuliani is a man who actually fired his police commissioner because he was getting too much credit for the city's drop in crime. I'd have given Bill Bratton a medal. Rudy gave him the boot. You don't have to be mean to be tough. And a lot of the time, Rudy, I don't think you know the difference. I do care, and he doesn't. Is there any reason to think that a mayor who slashed the school budget by $6 billion, tried to sell off the city's hospitals, pushed for tuition hikes at our universities, and threw 300,000 kids out of their after-school programs really cares about you? I have a clear idea of where I want to take this city over the next 4 years. Rudy doesn't. I see a school system that's failing our kids, 1 of 10 New Yorkers out of work, domestic violence up, school violence up, nearly half of New York's kids living in poverty, welfare reform that moves people to streets and soup kitchens without getting them a job. According to Rudy, our schools are fine, and our astronomical unemployment rate is really a sign of the city's health. That's what he says. In 4 State of the City speeches, the mayor hasn't mentioned the word homelessness once. You can't solve problems you don't see. Rudy doesn't see these problems, I do. I have plans to solve them, he doesn't. Tonight, in fact, he'll spend a lot of time telling you how most of them are already solved. He'll talk about the past, I'll talk about the future. It's not a beauty contest, friends. It's a contest for the future of this city, its families, and its children.
Thank you very much. Mr. Giuliani.
Good evening. Thank you very, very much to Dennis Walcott, to the Urban League, to New York One, to all of the people who have sponsored this debate, the Campaign Finance Board, to the participants. This is an important discussion of the future of New York City. And I'm going to try to keep it on issues, and I'm going to try to keep it on the things that are really important to people rather than personal negative attacks. 4 years ago, I ran for mayor of New York City because I thought this city was in a crisis. We had gone through a period of time in which we had more murder each year than in any other prior year in the history of the city. We were averaging 2,000 murders a year. We had lost 320,000 private sector jobs. Jobs were hemorrhaging out of the city. And our school system was in a crisis. The fact is that national magazines were writing about the city of New York things like the rotting apple. We were described as a place that 60 to 70% of people wanted to leave, and people didn't see much of a future in the city of New York. I believe we've made a turnaround. I believe that New York City in a number of areas is now showing remarkable success. That doesn't mean we've solved all problems. That doesn't mean we still don't have horrendous and very difficult problems to face. But I think we face it from success, not trying to destroy the city or to destroy the success that it has for partisan political reasons. I believe we have to build on that success to continue to reduce crime, to fight for the 150,000 jobs we still have to bring back. We've brought back 170,000, and to take on one more very big challenge, bigger than all of the rest that we've dealt with before, and that is to really eliminate the drugs in our neighborhoods, around our schools. That's a challenge for New Yorkers, the capital of the world.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani. The panel, please hold your applause because you're taking away the time. Thank you very much. The panel of journalists representing our co-sponsoring organizations for tonight's debate are Andrew Kurtzman for New York One, Beth Furtick for WNYC Radio, and Herson Barrero for El Diario La Prensa. In each round, the candidate who is asked a question will have 1 minute to answer. Each of the others then will have 1 minute to respond. And the candidate who was originally asked the question will then have 30 seconds to rebut. The first question is from Andrew Kurtzman for Olga Rodriguez.
Good evening, Ms. Rodriguez. The city has experienced a dramatic drop in crime, but along with a drop in crime have come complaints that the police have created a repressive situation on the city streets. Residents, or some residents, at least in minority neighborhoods like this one, complain that police represent an occupying force. Is this the reality, or is this an overreaction?
I believe it's not an overreaction at all. I believe the city police department, like all police departments and repressive forces like it in the United States, have one aim and one aim only, to defend property and wealth of the few who hold it against those of us who are without it and those of us whose wages are being cut, who are driven onto the streets homeless, and whose social services are being cut. You simply have to go through a list of names: Abner Luima, Kevin Cedeno, Antonio Baez, and there are countless others. It would take me more than the time allotted me to read them to understand why there is a deep-going opposition to the police department here and the war that they wage in our community. The so-called war on crime and the war on drugs, there's one announced every other day now, are designed as a war against us and designed to keep us against resisting effectively the attacks that are coming down. And they will eventually be used against us, including elite police forces.
Thank you very much. Ms. Messenger.
The vast majority of police officers in this city are fighting crime and fighting it effectively. But some officers don't know the limits, and some officers appear not to know how to work in different neighborhoods. That is the occasion for the serious increase in allegations of police abuse and police brutality. In the last 4 years, complaints of police brutality to the Civilian Complaint Review Board have gone up 56%. But the issue, Mr. Kurtzman, is that this could all be addressed if, in fact, we had an independent set of monitors to look at allegations of inappropriate police behavior. A strong Civilian Complaint Review Board, not one that the mayor has tried to defund every year that he's been mayor. An independent monitor recently approved for the second time by the City Council, now sitting on the mayor's desk. Signing that bill would allow us to protect those vast majority of cops who do a good job and move more quickly against those who do not.
Thank you. Mr. Giuliani.
In the first half of 1993, before I was mayor, there were 67 murders in East New York. This year, in the first half, there were 14 too many. Here in Harlem, in the first half of 1993, there were 27 murders. This year, there were only 5. And there has been a significant drop in crime, even more significant in the minority neighborhoods than in the rest of the city. That comes about because the police and communities most often work together. Yes, there's a problem of police officers who act improperly, who act criminally. Those are things that we address, and we address them dramatically when they happen. But even there, what we're seeing this year is a drop in complaints of brutality, 25, 30%. I believe the police department is moving in the right direction. And I believe most people in this city feel that the police department is working very, very hard to protect them against the kind of violence that most often occurs. The way in which people in this city face a risk is not from a police officer. They face a risk from other people in this city.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani. Thank you.
If I could follow up, though, the question, Mr. Mayor, was not about individual cases, brutality, as much as about a perception on the streets of some neighborhoods that police have become something of a repressive force. And my question was, is that perception reality or an overreaction?
Like any perception, some of it is reality, some of it is an overreaction. And what we need in this situation are more moderates, more people that can see that there are times in which you have to defend the police when police officers are falsely accused, and you have to stand with the mayor, the police commissioner, stand there when police officers are being abused and falsely accused, and you have to take action against police officers at times who are acting improperly. This particular police commissioner, for example, has dismissed in the last year alone 100 police officers. I don't think he has any reluctance to dismiss and to discipline police officers who are improper.
Thank you.
But at the same time, we need communities to stand with the police when the police, just as often and sometimes more often, are unfairly accused by people who are constantly attacking the police department.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani. Ms. Rodriguez, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
I think the reality is quite the opposite. Not counted in the great FBI figures are the numbers of deaths caused at the hands of police in this city and the numbers of crimes committed against the average working person in this city by the police department. We are for the arrest, the jailing, and prosecuting to the fullest extent of the law any officer accused of police brutality. Mr. Luima remains hospitalized while Volpe and the rest walk the streets. The murderer of Anthony Baez is carted off in handcuffs for another crime. That should tell you a little bit about these perceptions being reality.
Thank you very much. Next question is from Ms. Furtick to Ms. Messenger.
Ms. Messenger, your opponent, Rudy Giuliani, says electing you would mean a return to the failed democratic politics of the past. It was just a few years ago that New York had a record murder rate, an exodus of local businesses, soaring numbers of people on welfare, and a Times Square covered in sleaze. You were a leader of the city's democratic establishment during that time. Do you share a piece of the blame?
This election is about the future and not the past. It's not which issues I took what position on in the time that I was privileged to be in the City Council or serve as Borough President. It's what I will do to address the problems that are not yet getting nearly sufficient attention in this city. We have 1 million school children in a city, in this city, reading, more than half of them not at grade level. We have schools that have become grossly overcrowded because of this mayor's $6 billion cut. What we need to worry about is what positions each of us will take to solve those problems that plague us for the future. I've laid out very specific plans to raise standards in schools, to reduce overcrowding, to invest in professional development, to create additional jobs in this city. It is the future by which people ought to judge us tonight, what our plans are for solving the real problems in the city today.
Follow-up, I know that you want to focus on the future, but speaking of these problems which were in the past not too long ago, do you think that you shared any part of that, and why did that happen?
I don't think you can. I can't answer that question as globally as you posed it, Beth. There are times you can ask Mayor Dinkins, you can ask Mayor Koch. There are times when I disagreed with those policies. There are times when this city was beset by external problems and everybody was pulling together to try to solve them. But because there was not the particular success that we're currently enjoying on Wall Street, we didn't have the money to solve all of those problems.
Mr. Giuliani?
Well, it seems to me that Ms. Messenger didn't answer the question. And the fact is that she does prefer the policies and programs of the prior administration, the Dinkins administration, over the policies and programs of this administration. You have a right to have that view. People do. She's running away from it. And to say that your record is not up for examination and what you've done in the past when you run for mayor is really entirely unrealistic. She spent the first opening statement here talking about my record and attacking it. She has a right to do that. I have a right to disagree with it. But she doesn't have a right to kind of shield her record unless she's embarrassed of it when you're running for mayor of New York City. I believe that this city was headed in the wrong direction on crime, on jobs, on welfare, on schools. I turned it around. I turned it in a different direction. If you want to turn it back, fine. But don't pretend you're moving toward the future if that's what you want to do. And I want to move toward the future, building on the successes that we've had and taking on one more challenge that cynics don't believe we can do much about, which is to dramatically reduce drugs in our schools and in our neighborhoods.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Well, the reality for working people in New York is quite different. There is a renaissance, but it's for the rich businessmen, the bankers, and the stockbrokers. And all of the so-called renaissance is based on the speculative bubble in Wall Street, which is threatening to collapse at any moment. 75% of the revenues of the city come from workers' taxes, and fully 1/5 of the revenues are poured to pay back the debt, the massive debt of the city of New York. 10% of working people are officially unemployed, and a large percentage, a much higher percentage of youth, especially in communities like this one here in Harlem and the Black and other Latino communities throughout the city, are not experiencing the great march forward that is being spoken of here. We need a program for jobs, a program that is a massive public works program to build schools that are not dry cleaning facilities that drive our children in the poorest communities to be scattered into other crowded schools. We need a public work program that will build a transit system that works and runs for everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Ms. Messenger, 30-second rebuttal.
I want to focus on solutions for the future, but let me be clear, Beth, I am proud of my record as a strong Democrat. I am proud of having been part of a party and a city administration that spoke out for children who were not learning, that fought against increased homelessness, that would not have tolerated a current situation in which 70,000 people, 45,000 of them children, are turned away from soup kitchens and food pantries because we say we don't have enough food in a city that is realizing great surpluses. That's just absurd. And those many people out there who don't have jobs, who are suffering poor education, are the people who are not getting any attention in this administration. I'm proud to have been their spokesperson.
Next question will be Mr. Burrell for Mr. Giuliani.
Buenas noches a todos. Señor Giuliani, several former city officials, Schools Chancellor Ramon Cortines and Police Commissioner William Branton among them, were forced to leave or resigned under the pressure, public pressure and criticism and ridicule that you sometimes stated about them publicly. Many New Yorkers, including Ms. Messenger, obviously tonight and yesterday on New York One, labeled you a bully and a basher. Believe you have an abrasive confrontational style that interferes with some of the good things that you actually do. Does one have to be a bully in order to get New York into the next millennium?
That's about the nicest thing he said about me in 2 months.
Oh, there are more nicer things. I have others. I have others. And by the way, I think you're both cute. You're not ugly.
Pardon me? What was that?
Both of you are cute.
Gerson, there'll be no flirting here, okay? Okay. Let's just keep this on the up and up. We don't want any more trouble than we already have had.
That's
okay?
right.
Thank you. The fact is that what I expect out of people that work in city government is performance. I take this job very, very seriously. I work at it very hard. And I expect that people have to perform. And if they're performing, if they are using money in a wise way, if they're using it intelligently, if they're dealing with the problems of children, for example, and not just the rhetoric of change, but the reality of change, the way Rudy Crew is, they're not going to have a stronger supporter than me as the mayor of the city of New York. If they're not performing, just talking about it, and things are, going in the wrong direction, then I've got to do something about it. I have to step up to it, and I have to try to make changes. You only have 4 years as mayor of New York City to make changes. And if you're going to be unwilling to take on some conflict, you're never going to make change. So that's the style that I have. I think it works most of the time. Like anything else a human being does, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But by and large, I think it's turned this city in the right direction.
Thank you very much, and thank you for stopping on time so I didn't have to be a bully in this regard.
So being a bully has worked.
Gerson, I really think we should try to keep this discussion above that name-calling kind of thing. I mean, that isn't particularly productive.
No, I just want to get that.
The fact is that I'm strong about the views that I have. I wanted to see the school system turn around faster than Mr. Cortines was willing to do it. Rudy Crew has now become the chancellor. I helped to bring him here, support him completely. Reading scores are up, math scores are up. A lot more work needs to be done. There are a lot of difficulties that need to be faced. But I have, and we have, a schools chancellor who's a man who will take on corrupt and incompetent school boards and throw them out, who will remove superintendents. He removed 18 of them out of 32. That's the kind of action that I needed for the children of New York City. If you assume that the school system was failing, you can't leave it all in place and expect it to succeed. Somebody's got to make the tough decisions and say, no, you really can't get the job done. You really can't get it done. You really can't. That's the way in which I approach it. That's my philosophy. People call you all kinds of names as mayor of New York City.
Thank you, Mr.
I can't be
Giuliani.
responsible for all of them.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez.
Well, I would say that you have to be a fighting worker to bring New York into the next millennium, because what's happening is a deep-going crisis that is going to come crashing down even harder on those of us who can ill afford it, which are the majority in this city. The schools are a mess. Anybody who has to take their children to the average public school in this city or anywhere in the United States knows that public education is undergoing one of its biggest assaults. The housing situation in this city is appalling. And you just have to ask the person who's sitting next to you who may live in this neighborhood about that, and the rent gouging that goes on, and the protection for the landlords and the big bankers and businessmen who are behind the landlords that goes on. I think that the fight is for working people to join together, to fight in a common movement to advance our interests against the big businessmen and bankers in this city, and to fight for a workers' and farmers' government. That's what my campaign tries to put forward and to try to advance through our participation in the ongoing struggles. Thank you.
Ms. Messenger.
As I said, Mr. Barrero, you don't need to be mean to be tough. Bullying and dividing hurt our city. It drove a good chancellor and a good police commissioner out of office. Failing to negotiate with the controller and the city council on the part of the mayor has driven issue after issue into the courts when those issues should have been negotiated out, saving us a lot of money, reaching an effective compromise solution. Denying access to information has become the hallmark of this administration. That is an anti-democratic move that doesn't allow people to work collaboratively with the mayor. And by the way, Mr. Mayor, reading scores are down since you became mayor.
Well, actually, reading scores are up by 0.1% since I became mayor, and reading scores went up this year by the highest they've gone up in the last 10 years. That's just the reality. You know, I root for success in the system. Some people root for failure so that they can try to take political gain. I believe Rudy Crew is doing a good job as Chancellor of the New York City school system. I think he's turned around the personnel in the system, and we're beginning to see results. We're beginning to see reading scores go up, the highest in 10 years. Math scores are at the highest level they've been in a very long time, but there's still a lot to go. And that's why I'd like to be mayor for the next 4 years, to work in partnership with him to really turn it around.
Next question is Ms. Furtick for Ms. Rodriguez.
The recent controversy at the Greenwich Village School, where a group of parents tried to raise enough money to pay for a teacher to keep class size from growing, illustrates the problems of school crowding. How would you have handled that problem if elected, and what would you do to make classes smaller?
Well, I think you have to hire more teachers. I'm against any form of private funding of public education. It's a universal right that was fought for by working people and should be extended to everyone. I believe that only wealthy school districts and parents could afford to do what those parents did. But I understand also the crowding of schools that are going on. And the answer to that is to fight to change the priorities where monies go into education and not into the ever-growing police department in the city, including the recently announced elite corps that will be put on the streets. I think what we need is to reverse priorities completely. And only that way can public education be preserved. There's a major assault. It's not just on this level. It's the question of the voucher system, which is being proposed by the Clinton administration and supported by bipartisan support in Congress. And I think that we have to wage a fight as working people for education for all as a universal right and the necessary funding for it.
Thank you. Ms. Messenger.
The fundamental problem of overcrowding in this city, which is driving children into hallways and closets and stairwells and bathrooms for their classes, which is leaving school after school with too many children stuffed into each class and too many children in each building, is a direct consequence of this mayor's $6 billion cut to the education budget of this city. A mayor who said, when asked why he went to the schools to cut, something has to give somewhere. Yes, Mr. Mayor, but why where our children are? When you cut the schools that badly so that you leave schools with no additional personnel and with overcrowded classes, if you want parents to be involved, if you want corporations and foundations to come in and help, as I do, then you have to allow them to come in and help, to buy a librarian, as one school in my borough did, to buy science and art teachers that were missing from the basic budget, as other schools did, or to buy a teacher to reduce class size. Schools that are under the federal Chapter 1 coverage get $700 more per child, and they are allowed to use federal money to reduce class size.
To reduce class size, would you rely on those corporations and private contributions?
No, I have indicated very clearly that I believe that my top priority is education. My first priority will be to go school by school and district by district to reduce overcrowding. And I have identified where there is $1 billion in savings in operating the government of this city to fund the additional teachers, the additional lease space, the additional construction space that we need to give our children the fair start in developing the skills they need, which I promise you they are not getting today in many, too many schools in this city.
Mr. Giuliani, please hold your applause.
Just to set the record straight, I have a little chart here that shows that when I came into office, 25% of the budget of New York City was being spent on schools. Today, it's 28% of the budget of New York City. When I came into office, $7.9 billion was being spent on New York City schools. Now it's $8.5 billion, which is the highest ever in the history of the city. And the per capita spending on students is the highest ever. The unfortunate thing is the way in which my opponent plays fast and loose with the facts. We cut projected spending in the city for everything, because the city was on its way to bankruptcy if we didn't. And we cut $6 or $7 billion in projected spendings. But the schools were cut less than anything else from projected spending. But the actual expenditure for students has gone up. And unlike my predecessor, David Dinkins, I didn't have to be sued twice for violating Stavisky-Goodman and dropping the percentage of contribution below 25%. And now it's at the highest level ever. And much of that was to restructure it so that the money gets to the children and not to the bureaucrats.
Ms. Furtick?
Just to get back to the basic question.
I'm asking you, hold on, Ben. I'm asking you not to applaud. Thank you. You're taking away from your candidate's time. Thank you. Ms. Furtick.
Just to clarify, to get back to the basic question, what would you do to lower the class sizes?
Well, what we will do to lower the class sizes is to continue as we move through school-based budgeting to get the money to the classrooms and the schools. There's enough money in the school system. There always has been. $9 billion is a lot of money. The problem with the school system was the need to restructure it. The money wasn't going to the students. The money wasn't going to the teachers. The money was going to the out-of-control bureaucracy. And part of my frustration with the first chancellor when I was in office was the fact that we weren't doing enough to change that. Chancellor Crew did something enormously courageous and really bold that hasn't been recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani.
He did school-based budgeting. So the money can now go to the classrooms and the schools.
Ms. Rodriguez, 30-second rebut.
I'm for lifetime education that includes free university education, which is under attack here. The city university system, which is one of the most important battles that was won for open admissions and free tuition, is under massive attack. And I think that the fight for public education includes the fight for university education. The monies are there. The question is the reversal of priorities and the reversal of defending the taxes of those who are the wealthiest while we reap more out of the poor. So I'm for advancing the fight to reverse the priorities for education and other social needs.
Next question is from Mr. Barrero to Ms. Messenger.
Senora Messenger, as a person who has devoted her entire political life to the Democratic Party, how do you feel when your turn comes up for a shot to make history or her story by being elected the 108th mayor of New York City, and you see a parade of 30 Democratic elected office holders and other top members of your party turn away from you as if you had a contagious disease and run to endorse the Republican mayor? What does it feel like, and how much has this affected your ability to really engage your campaign to get your message to New Yorkers?
Endorsers endorse for various reasons. The mayor has more endorsers than I do. He has more money than I do. I know I'm the underdog, but what I have is a vision for this city, for its future, and a plan for how to get there. And that is why I have an extraordinary amount of support. It is why I believe that the people of this city will choose a mayor ready to address the issues that have not been addressed over the last 4 years. You know, the mayor comes here with cute charts, but the fact of the matter is the school population is going up every year. Per capita spending in real dollars is down, and class size is up. And what we are missing at this debate is the report of the teacher of the 9th grade class in Bushwick who has 45 kids in her science class, of the parents who find 36 kids in their kids' school 3rd grade class, of the student in Harlem in this neighborhood who asked me yesterday why his textbook says that Ronald Reagan is president and the Soviet Union is the greatest threat that we have to world safety. Those are the issues that need to be heard at this debate, because they raise the question of where we're going to go with the future, whoever is with us.
Wait a minute, as a lifelong Democrat who's been loyal to the party and its different candidates, you're not hurt? You mean to say you don't care that they walked over to your opponent?
I'm interested in the support of the individuals in this city who go to the voting booth and vote on November 4th. Many, many people who are represented by Democrats who may have endorsed the mayor will support the candidate for mayor who has a solution to the problem of 10% unemployment, who recognizes what is happening in the schools and in the colleges of this city and is prepared to address those problems. And I am that candidate.
Thank you. Mr. Giuliani.
The reason that so many Democrats are supporting me is because my opponent represents really a kind of way out fringe of the Democratic Party. And Democrats like Claire Schulman and Floyd Flake and Ed Towns and Priscilla Wooten aren't supporting me for money, which is what she suggested before, which is pretty insulting. I can't imagine that the Reverend Floyd Flake is supporting me because of money. He's supporting me because there is a lot of movement, a lot of change going on in his community. Priscilla Wooten was made the target of attack in her primary by David Dinkins and Al Sharpton because she had the temerity to say that I'm doing a good job for East New York. She believes I'm doing a good job for East New York because murder in East New York is down from 67 in the first half of 1993 to only like 14 this year, because the schools there are doing better. Because, in fact, there are now jobs in East New York when 4 years ago we were hemorrhaging jobs. So, you know, people in different communities are entitled to different viewpoints, including in the minority communities. But when people in the minority community stand up and support me, they're attacked by a lot of the establishment. And it really is a shame.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Well, I think that this is just a very good example of how there's not a tinker's difference between the two candidates' program, and there's not much of a perception of a difference among the average working person who's voting in this election. There is not a real program that's put forward that fights for the interest of the vast majority in this city, that doesn't play games with who's going to put people who are cops on the streets more than the other, that doesn't attack each other, but a clear political program that can put forward a fight to advance the cause of working people and the oppressed in this city. This is a city where we just had an incidence of 57 immigrant workers who are deaf, who are still being held at a Queens facility and have committed no crime. In fact, they made a crime aware to the public. They brought that crime to the fore, despite whatever difficulties they had doing that. And yet, nothing has been done for those people. So I think we are fighting. I think there's not a difference between the two candidates, and most people recognize it. So who you endorse isn't important.
Ms. Messenger, 30-second rebuttal.
Yes, the mayor is a little bit paranoid. I did not suggest any reason why those individuals were supporting you. What I did say is that I am very proud to be part of a party that stands for education, for health care, and for mass transit. Rudy Giuliani is a Republican. He is part of a party that in Washington has moved to slash education and eliminate the Department of Education, that has moved to slash Medicare and Medicaid. They do it in Washington, and he does it here. $6 billion out of the school system, an invitation to the governor to cut Medicaid a little bit further, a transit fare that has gone up on his watch.
Mr. Kurtzman, Mr. Giuliani.
Mr. Giuliani, you came to office as a reformer, yet in recent months your campaign has been fined over $200,000 for taking illegal campaign contributions. You have raised huge sums of money from the rich and the powerful and people who do business with city government, and two of your closest advisors have done hundreds of thousands of dollars representing clients who are seeking access to City Hall. How does this fit the description of a reformer?
Is that one question or three?
One question.
There are like three parts to it. The fact, let me take the campaign finance part. I have great respect for the campaign finance board. I've run 3 campaigns now for mayor of New York City. I've followed the same rules in all 3. And the dispute with regard to corporate contributions is my campaign following the same rules that we followed in the first 2 campaigns, and now there's a different interpretation of it. I disagree with that interpretation, or my lawyers disagreed with that interpretation. But the Campaign Finance Board, I believe, is doing a very good job. You can disagree and have respect for an institution, and I have great respect for them. We've repaid the money. We're going through 4 years of records and finding it. We will turn it all back. And every time there's ever been a question about the propriety of money, I have given it back. And with regard to lobbying, I have a different view of it than most people, and I say it over and over again, and I hope it gets through. You don't need a lobbyist. You're wasting your money. If to contact my administration, do it directly. If you want to pay a lobbyist, you have a right to do it. It's legal. It's constitutional. You can make that judgment, but you're wasting your money giving money to a lobbyist. You can do it directly.
The question is, how does this fit the description of a reformer?
I think it fits the description of a reformer really very, very well. I think I very clearly demonstrate to people that I bend over backwards to try very hard to comply with what the rules and the law happen to be. The dispute with the Campaign Finance Board, we followed a rule that existed for 2 campaigns They changed the interpretation of the rule. Some lawyers would agree with that change, some would disagree with it. We're now following it. But it takes a little while to go through 4 years of records and return all the money that was collected based on what we would regard as an interpretation that existed, what they would regard as an incorrect one. But I continue to respect the institution. I believe they're doing a very good job, and they're a real advance for New York City.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez?
Well, I think that the whole flap around the campaign financing of the Giuliani campaign and the other candidates of the Democratic Party is a good example how it's very hard in a society that's run for big business to control big business influence and contributions to election campaigns. My party and our campaign is a working class campaign. We will not reach anywhere close to the 7,700 single person contribution to our entire campaign, because our contributions rely on the contributions of working people who are, like ourselves, very hard hit by the economic situation. The reality is these elections are very undemocratic because they are run by these people. The Campaign Finance Board's rules itself require that one raise $250,000. Even the Reverend Al Sharpton, who won a significant vote and in the Democratic primary, couldn't reach that amount, much less a working class party.
Ms. Messenger?
The campaign finance law is very clear, but Rudy Giuliani has had 138 violations of that law, had to return $750,000 and pay a fine of $220,000. And let's be clear, Rudy, you were warned in the press for months that this money was being collected over the limit in violation of the law, and you did not return it until threatened by the Campaign Finance Board that you would be out of this system. In my judgment, lobbying is a legitimate and an important activity. The question is whether individuals who are described as special advisors to the mayor, who hold power at the behest and at the hand of the mayor, should be allowed to lobby on behalf of private clients and not be required to provide any of the financial disclosure information that people who are on the mayor's staff do. I believe that both Ray Harding and Herman Badillo should comply with full financial disclosure, and I urge that at the first time that their list of lobbying clients was exposed.
Mr. Giuliani, 30-second rebuttal.
Well, first of all, there's a serious misstatement. There was no many month-long discussion or debate about this change in this rule. It took place over a short period of time, and we complied with it as soon as we saw the new interpretation, although my lawyers disagreed with that interpretation. I think the answer to it is, in the future, cut out corporate contributions. One of the confusions created here is that in many campaigns, corporate contributions are not allowed. In New York City campaigns, corporate contributions were allowed. And this is a confusing rule about what constitutes control of a corporation.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani.
I would certainly be willing to cut out corporate contributions.
Before we move to the next question, I must remind the candidates, as negotiated with their campaign teams, we will not allow any props whatsoever in tonight's debate. So I just want to put that reminder on the table. You have a follow-up, Mr. Kurtzman? You were looking.
That's all right.
All right? Okay. Next question will be Mr. Barrero for Ms. Rodriguez.
Senora Rodriguez, the Giuliani administration takes great pride in the success of reduction of crime while downplaying incidents of police brutality and corruption within the ranks of the NYPD. However, as polls indicate, very few New Yorkers trust the Civilian Complaint Review Board, while others feel that courtesy, professionalism, and respect initiative has not worked, pointing to the Abner Louima case. If you were elected mayor, would you adopt the Mullen Commission's recommendations as a way to deal with police corruption and brutality?
Well, it seems to be a Mullen Commission type investigation of police corruption in this city and every major city in the country every 5 years. It's necessary in order to keep the police as a repressive apparatus that can adequately serve, especially in times of social crisis as we have now. The Mullen Commission brought to light a small tip of the iceberg of the commission, the corruption, which is a part and parcel of the established police forces in this country and around the world, in the capitalist world. So whether or not I would adopt the Mullen Commission isn't the real question. The real question is we have to organize a whole different kind of society and a whole different kind of way in which we organize their protection of working people. And I don't believe it's the police who do that. I believe that they are the purveyors of the real crime in our community.
My question was, would you adopt the Mullen Commission report? It may not be the real question, but that's the question I'm asking.
No, because I think the Mullen Commission report is part of the fig leaf that covers up the real corruption that exists and that is an endemic part and part of the police forces in this city and around the nation. You need to have Mullen reports, and you will see another one in 5 years or so.
Ms. Messenger?
Yes, Mr. Barrero, I would adopt the recommendations of the Mullen Commission for the establishment of an independent audit and review board to monitor those police officers who step across the line. I believe the vast majority of good, hardworking officers are protected by such a board. And by the way, I would adopt the recommendation of Rudy Giuliani's Commission on Police Corruption, which urged the mayor last December to adopt tough sanctions against police officers who give false testimony. The question to the mayor tonight is the council has now for the second time passed legislation implementing the major recommendation of the Mullen Commission. That legislation is on your desk. I urge you to tell us tonight whether or not you will sign that bill and whether or not you are going to act on the recommendations of your own Commission on Police Corruption, because if you had, I think the activities of officers in the Baez and Louima cases would have been different.
Well, that's a totally absurd statement. The Louima case was a case of perverse alleged brutality. It had nothing to do with corruption. The Baez case was a case also of brutality in which Police Commissioner Safer really took the most decisive action. This was a failure of the criminal justice system to convict Officer Lavoti. Police Commissioner Safer dismissed Officer Lavoti against an awful lot of pressure to the contrary by the PBA and elsewhere. Police Commissioner Safer has also dismissed 100 police officers. The recommendations that are being talked about, he's implemented with regard to much tougher discipline. And we fought in Albany to stop a watering down of his discipline that was voted by Democrats and Republicans in Albany. So we fought very, very hard on that. With regard to the legislation by the City Council, there's a legal problem with it. The first time they passed this law, they deprived the mayor of the power that is given to the mayor by the city charter. And we went to court over that and won.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani.
So you can't sign legislation that's unconstitutional if you're a president or violative of the city charter if you're a mayor.
I'm sorry, but Mr. I need to follow up. On the Baez case, Officer Lavoti was on the monitoring program that is presently implemented, supposedly, even by this commissioner, the prior commissioner, and it wasn't enforced. So there's...
I missed the first part of that, Herson.
Officer, when you mentioned that Commissioner Safer enforced as much as he could the law against Officer Lavoti, and it was the fault of the judicial system for not prosecuting him. The fact is, while he was on the NYPD, he was already on a monitoring program as a result of some other allegations of abuse that he had.
That is absolutely correct.
And the monitoring program didn't work, sir. So what I'm asking you...
You're absolutely right, and he's changed it. If Officer Lavoti were presently a police officer, in fact, if one of the officers in the Louima case were presently a police officer, under Police Commissioner Safer's new rules, they would be dismissed from the police department. One of the police officers in the Louima case, while on probation in his first couple of months as a police officer, committed an act of disrespect, and I believe also of brutality. Under the old rules, that was back in 1992, he wasn't dismissed, he was kept on. Under the rules that Police Commissioner Safer changed as a result of the report that she says we didn't implement,
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani.
He would now be dismissed, and about 100 people have been dismissed as a result of the much tougher approach that Commissioner Safer has.
Ms. Rodriguez, 30 seconds to rebut.
Independent civilian police review boards have shown themselves not to work. Of the thousands of cases that are reported, a single policeman has been dismissed. This tells you that the corruption and the brutality are a endemic part of what the system of police enforcement is, not just in New York, but in every city in the United States. Their purpose is to defend the property of the rich. And I believe that the Mullen Commission report is part and parcel of being able to continue with that process, just like the commissions that preceded it.
It is now time to move on to the next round. And in this round, each candidate will have the opportunity to ask 2 questions to one or both of their fellow candidates. The questioner has 30 seconds to pose the question. The candidate answering will have 1 minute to respond. And then the questioner will then have a 15-second follow-up, and the candidate answering a final 30-second response. You guys got that? Set. The order for this next round has also been determined earlier, and the first question comes from Ms. Rodriguez.
My question is to Mr. Giuliani. On this Sunday, October 12th, there will be a protest outside of the United Nations that's calling for full rights for all immigrants. I will be participating, along with hundreds of others, in this important event. My campaign calls for a world without borders, to stop the deportation of all immigrants and for full and equal rights. The experience of immigrants in their countries of origin enriches our working class in this country. What is your position on this question?
Well, my position on immigrants, I think, is very clear. I think I've tried very hard to change the national view with regard to immigrants. Last year at this time, the United States Congress, in a bill signed by President Clinton, was going to deprive 70,000 legal immigrants of SSI benefits, mostly disabled and elderly immigrants, of food stamps, another 120, 130,000. I organized an immigration coalition. I went around the country to various places and spoke on this. I incurred the wrath of my own political party, the Republican Party, which I have often stood up to when I thought it was in the best interest of the city of New York, which may be one of the reasons why so many Democrats support me, because I've been willing to cross party lines at times in which I've been strongly criticized. And I must say, we've been quite successful. Congress has restored many of the benefits, unfortunately not all, but for most of the 70,000 elderly and most of the 70,000 disabled. And in working with the state, we will be able to provide the food stamps for the rest. So we're working very hard on behalf of legal immigrants, because I believe in legal immigration very strong.
Ms. Rodriguez, 15-second follow-up.
Well, my campaign is working on behalf of both the legal and the so-called illegal immigrants in this city and around the country. The one question I would have as a follow-up is 1.5 million immigrants are slated to be deported under the new provisions of the new immigration law nationally, and are told that they will not be able to return within 3 to 10 years, if ever. What is your position on that question?
We have a different view on legal and illegal immigrants. I support very strongly the rights of legal immigrants. We've even brought a lawsuit to try to vindicate those rights. With regard to illegal immigration, I don't believe it should be encouraged. I think illegal immigration can be very dangerous. I believe that borders that can be crossed by people illegally, those people can carry guns and drugs into this country. And I think the federal government has to do more to control illegal immigration. But once illegal immigrants are in this city, I also believe they should be treated humanely and decently. I signed Executive Order 124, which Ed Koch originally signed, and David Dinkins.
Thank you. Next question is from Ms. Messenger.
Rudy, 2 years ago, you said that in order to keep high-quality people in city government, it was necessary to pay more. You took a $35,000 increase. You added $2 million to the budget for your commissioners and senior staff, raised deputy mayor salaries to $138,000. At the same time, this city has had a growing teacher shortage. The starting salary for teachers is $29,000, and we are losing many of our best teachers to the suburbs. Do you think it was correct to give senior staff raises while teachers got nothing?
I believe it is important to encourage the very, very best people in government. I think it's important to make certain that they're paid at amounts that are comparative with the private sector. We lose people to the private sector because they can't sometimes deal with all of the family responsibilities that they have. And what you neglect to mention is that during this same period of time, teachers and others were given a 13, 14, 15% raise, depending on how you calculate all of the benefits. And those officials that received raises hadn't received raises in something like 8 or 10 years. And other workers in New York City had received raises, if not every year, most years. So I believe in paying people decent wages, giving them incentives. Also, you neglect to mention that we cut dramatically the size of city government. Many of these agencies, people are doing a lot more work because there are less people doing the work. There are 24,000 fewer people working for the city of New York today than 4 years ago. For example, in the police department, the raises that were done for the senior staff, and this was Commissioner Bratton who did it, were funded out of reducing positions so that they could pay for their own raises.
Thank you.
You
Ms.
didn't
Messenger?
answer my question. The teachers in this city got no wage increases for 2 years, during which time Guess what? They also had to feed their families and house their families, and many of them left this city for the suburbs. So did some of our best principals. We have a hemorrhage of quality people who I would like to see stay in government, working in our school system on behalf of 1 million children, and those individuals got no such benefit.
But what you're neglecting to mention is it was a 5-year contract, and over the 5-year contract, they got a 13 to 15% increase. The reason they were able to get such a high increase is because it was funded by 2 years of no raises. They could have elected to get smaller raises for 5 years straight. What they did,
Senior staff
well, what they did, I didn't interrupt you, so I think you should give me a chance to answer the question.
Thank you.
What they did was make a choice. The choice they made was to compound their raise. 2 years of no raises, then higher raises in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th year, and now we're into the 3rd year, so they're realizing the benefit of that. That's a choice that gets made in collective bargaining. The only union that didn't go along with it was the PBA.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani. Next question is from Mr. Giuliani.
Well, I would ask Ms. Messenger whether she would make the commitment to keep on Rudy Crew and to support him. I think Rudy Crew is doing an excellent job as the Chancellor of the City of New York. I think that the school system needs a continuity. And when I listen to answer this question, I hear her talk about interviewing him and trying to figure out what his policies and programs are. They're pretty apparent. So I would like to see her support Rudy Crew as the Chancellor to keep him on for the next 3 to 4 years, whatever the term is that he has at least, so that there can be continuity in the school system.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani. Ms. Messenger.
My beef is not with Rudy Crew's performance, it's with Rudy Giuliani's performance in education. In fact, it is the case that reading scores are, unfortunately, more than a percentage point lower now than when you came into office. In fact, it is true that we have a severe overcrowding problem. You took great pleasure in announcing that the problem was on its way to being solved. There are still 88,000 kids without seats at desks in schools. There are indeed kids whose classroom is a bathroom or a converted closet or a hallway. What I want is a chancellor who will implement the plan that I've laid out, point by point, the plan to reduce overcrowding, the plan to do a pilot project in year-round schooling, the plan to set standards for kids and principals and teachers and hold them accountable to those standards, the plan to invest real dollars in the professional development of our teachers. And because you do not allow anyone who works for you to say anything to anybody without your permission, I need to wait until I can have a conversation with Rudy Crew to know where he stands on that.
Please, I will ask you once again, and this is the final time. Please, no applause. Thank you. Mr. Giuliani, follow up.
One of the reasons why people in this country distrust politicians is because they don't answer questions. And that isn't an answer to the question. Rudy Crew has been the Chancellor for 2 years. We know what he's doing. We know the success that he's had. There's nothing that you would have to ask him that isn't apparent already from his record, and this is just a dodge. It's the typical politicians bobbing and weaving and dodging.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani. Ms. Messenger?
You're entirely wrong. I want to know where Rudy Crew stands on the problem of textbooks and supplies. I didn't agree with Rudy Crew's refusal to allow the parents in PS 41 to participate actively. I want to know what Rudy Crew is going to do on a successive basis with me as mayor to get our fair share of education aid. You went to Albany and said you didn't want your fair share of education aid. I intend, as the next mayor of this city, to be aggressive in Albany, not only for our fair share of education aid, but to get the $1 billion in lottery profits that have never been assigned to the schools and to wage that fight. I want to know whether I have a chancellor who will do that with me.
Next question is from Ms. Rodriguez.
My question is for Ms. Messenger. In about 2 weeks, members of the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Union may strike against Amtrak for a long overdue wage increase. I will walk the picket lines in support of such a strike, as I will the picket lines of any city worker who is forced to strike for a decent wage. There's been a long and sad history of bipartisan government intervention to bust strikes in the by rail workers and other unions. Will you use your influence with the Democratic administration of William Clinton to oppose government strike breaking in the upcoming possible rail strike?
I don't know all of the issues that are at stake in the Amtrak rail strike, but I do know that I have a long, proud record of standing with workers, supporting them in their fight for fair wages and benefits. It's absolutely clear that We need a rail system to keep functioning in this country because the lifeblood of the country depends on it. I'm more than ready to look at the issues, and if there is something that I think is useful where I can weigh in with the President of the United States, I'd be happy to do that.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Well, it's almost certain the administration will invoke the Railway Labor Act. What will you do in that circumstance, which will put an end to that strike and the ability of those workers to advance their fight for a fair wage?
As I've been able to do in strike after strike, it is very often the case that if you are prepared to really talk with both sides, you can help people identify a common position. My guess is that the Amtrak workers and the President of the United States are perfectly able to do that around a table together to protect rail service to the country and to pay attention to the workers' concerns. But that is something that I have done in many, many disputes. It is why I urge people to choose a mayor who has some real skill in negotiating and bringing people together as a way to resolve issues, which is not the hallmark of the incumbent.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Messenger, your turn.
Mr. Mayor, we talked before about the fact that you have 138 violations of the campaign finance law and have had to refund $750,000. Much of that money came to you from people with rather suspect records themselves. Slumlords, people convicted of Medicaid fraud, of environmental violations. In one case, excess money was received from Bill Fugazi, who has recently been convicted of perjury. I understand that you have written the judge asking him to be lenient in his sentencing of Mr. Fugazi. My question is, why aren't you as tough on criminals who gave you illegal contributions as you are on other criminals? And will you agree tonight to release the Fugazi letter to the press and the public?
Sure, absolutely. I'll release it, and at the same time you can read Cardinal O'Connor's letter for Bill Fugazi and Bob Morgenthau, the district attorney's letter for Bill Fugazi, and that really is a pretty outrageous attack on the reputation of a man who had a problem, was convicted, but also is a person who has given a great deal of service to the city of New York. Kind of a really cheap thing to do. And the fact is, and please let me answer the question, maybe you don't like the answer, but you know, it's my answer. The fact is that Bill Fugazi helped this city at times when we've had racial crises and crises that involving people who were at war with each other in neighborhoods. He was of enormous assistance to me during the immigration crisis and getting that to the fore in Congress. I believe even if you ask your supporter David Dinkins, he would tell you that Bill Fugazi was enormously helpful during some of the racial conflicts in the early part of the 1990s. So this is a man who has another side to his record. And along with Cardinal O'Connor and Bob Morgenthau and probably about 50 other people, I laid that out for a federal judge who ended up giving him probation. And I'm proud that I wrote the letter.
Thank you, sir.
And I'd be happy to have you read it.
I'm glad that you released the letter. The fundamental question, Mr. Mayor, was do you look at the various suspect records of the people who give you campaign contributions? You have a very tough record as a prosecutor. You very often speak out against people who have violated even the smallest crimes, yet in your list, particularly of people who gave you more than $7,700, which you didn't know for a while was against the law, are people with serious convictions, Medicaid fraud, environmental pollution, slum law violations.
Question, please.
I have returned all money to people who have been convicted of serious violations. Every time it comes up, we do it. The fact is, you don't investigate every single person that gives money to you. I suspect if I did that, I would then be attacked by my political opponent for being a bully, which he constantly calls me and then claims that I call names.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Giuliani. The next question is from Mr. Giuliani.
That was an interesting answer. Now, right now there's a dispute, and a pretty strong one, about the death penalty. And the fact is that the death penalty is the law in this state. And when you become mayor of New York City, you swear to uphold the laws of the state of New York. Can you see any circumstance under which, as in essence, the chief executive officer of the police department of this city, that you would stand up and urge the use of the death penalty to protect police officers against cop killers? Is there any set of circumstances under which you would exercise your ability to speak out as the mayor of New York City to protect police officers who might be shot by people fleeing crimes, drug dealers, and others?
I support life in prison without parole for criminal offenses of that nature. I am morally opposed to the death penalty. I believe it is wrong for the state to take another person's life. That will not stop me in any way from assuming the position of mayor of this city and indicating that I know what the state law is and that I believe the state law should be followed.
Mr. Giuliani.
Even though you have moral opposition to the death penalty, however, it is now the law of this state. There is real concern that that law is not being applied on a fair and neutral basis because there are people who are opposed to it and that they are undercutting it. Will you use your position as mayor of New York City to speak out on that? After all, police officers depend on that law for protection of their lives. Would you use your position, despite your objections to it, to speak out as the chief magistrate, the chief executive officer of the police department, because this is something of grave concern to police officers who are slaughtered by cop killers?
Ms. Messenger.
As the chief magistrate of this city, with a moral opposition to the death penalty, I am someone who does not change her moral positions, and I have not over the entire course of my life and my public record. What I will do is what I believe it is appropriate for the chief magistrate to do, and that is to indicate that I know what the law of the state of New York is, that I assume that the district attorneys of this state in each county in this city and elsewhere around the state will exercise the law as they deem appropriate. And I believe that those issues and decisions should be left to those district attorneys. I can assure the members of the police department and the rest of the people who live in this city that I believe that violent crime needs tough response, that violent youth need to be tried as adults, and that people who commit murder should be in prison for life without parole.
Okay, we'll now go back to our panel of journalists, and the first question is from Mr. Kurtzman to Ms. Messenger.
Ms. Messenger, do you feel safer walking down the streets of New York than you felt 4 years ago? And as an upper middle class Manhattan resident, do you feel that your quality of life has improved in the last 4 years?
I continue to enjoy living in this city. I don't feel personally particularly safer one way or the other, but I am delighted that crime is down. Everybody in New York is delighted that crime is down. The question is whether or not, as we move into the next 4 years, we are going to pay attention to the issues that have not yet gotten sufficient attention. Some of those are within the police department and the police system, dealing with police brutality, paying attention to crimes closer to home. Youth crime, domestic violence, violence in schools, way up over the last 4 years. The question is more to the point whether, as we continue the assault on crime, which I can tell you that I will continue, we will start to pay attention to the 10% of this city, 330,000 New Yorkers, who are looking for work and can't find it. That requires a mayor who will not only continue the successful crime-fighting strategies, but will look to pay attention to how you grow the economy of this city.
Thank you, Ms.
Just to
Messenger.
follow up on the second part of that question, you live on the Upper West Side, you presumably walk the streets of the Upper West Side, use transportation up there. Do you feel your do you feel your quality of life has changed in the 4 years that Mayor Giuliani has been in office?
Well, on every single church and synagogue within a 5-block radius of my house, there are at least 2 homeless people who live on the steps of those churches and synagogues because they are allowed to live there. I use the subway almost every day, Mr. Kurtzman. There are as many panhandlers now as there were about a year ago, so I see plenty of ongoing quality of life problems. Sometimes they have been moved around, but believe me, they exist. They exist in very significant part because some of the policies of this administration telling people that there is no room in the inn, that they can't get into the homeless shelter.
Ms. Messenger, with all due respect, the question was whether your personal quality of life has changed.
No.
Mr. Giuliani.
Well, it has for most others in New York.
Please, again.
And the fact is that there is a very big difference between my opponent and me on dealing with crime. It was illustrated just yesterday when I described a massive program to deal with the youth gangs, criminal youth gangs in the city. She criticized me because she said that we should have more youth programs. Well, maybe she doesn't really understand who these youth gangs are. I don't think that youth programs will help the Bloods, the Crips, the Latin Kings, the Zulu Nation, MS-13. These are gangs that begin in jail and in prison. These are violent, repeat career criminals, and I don't think that giving them sewing lessons is going to help. So we have a major disagreement about how you approach crime. I believe that social programs are important, they are valuable, they can help, but when you're dealing with hardened criminals like the members of the Bloods, the Crips, the Latin Kings, and the Zulu Nation, it's almost an inappropriate thing to start talking about youth programs for them.
Mr. Barrero?
I just have to ask a follow-up of Mr. Giuliani. We talk about, you pointed to the gangs in public schools and all that, and this rise, but there's also gangs that, for example, killed Manuel Maggi. And there are gangs that assaulted a young man that I wrote about in May, Jovan Gonzalez. And those are white gangs in Catholic schools. And yet nothing is reported about that. So there's like a selective reporting of the Latin Kings and all that when there are white gangs in the 47th precinct. Nothing has been done.
President, I don't think there's anybody in this city that's done more about white gangs than me. Maybe it was before maybe you forget what I did before I was mayor of New York City.
Youth gangs, Mr. Mayor?
Youth gangs, the mafia, every form of organized crime imaginable. A couple of times my life was put in jeopardy doing that. I don't make determinations in terms of dealing with criminals, white, black, in between, something else, or whatever. The fact is, a criminal is a criminal. If it's a white gang, they should go to jail. If it's a black or Latino or some other gang, they should go to jail also. And if you look at my record, I don't think you're going to find someone that's put more organized criminals in prison than I did.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani.
And I don't think you're going to see an administration that's done more about cleaning up organized crime.
Thank you, sir.
The carting industry, the Fulton fish market,
Mr. Giuliani.
the garment industry than this administration.
Ms. Rodriguez?
Well, I think that some people feel safer walking in New York. I think one of the biggest gangs that our working class communities, especially black and Latino and Asian communities, have to deal with is the gang in blue. The gang that's protected by the biggest powers that there are in this city, starting from the federal government on down. That is the biggest gang that has to do with 62%.
The question was whether you feel safer and whether your quality of life
No, I
has
don't
improved.
feel safer. Every time a policeman approaches me, I get very worried. I'm the kind of person who is one of the people they think is a member of some gang because of who I am. I'm a working person and I'm not white. That's the reality in this city. And 62% of New Yorkers polled believe that's the reality. It's not a perception. You simply have to go to our communities to see this. No, I don't feel safer every time I see the gang in blue.
Ms. Messenger, 30 seconds.
Yes,
Please, once again, I am not going to remind you again.
the mayor's comments are trivial and deliberately designed to misrepresent my position. His police initiative against gangs makes sense, but the gangs are preying on our young people. They are recruiting among the 300,000 kids who have been pushed out of after-school programs. If you travel the whole city and listen and talk to parents, as I do, that's what they tell you. What are we going to do about these gangs that are showing up in my playground, in my kid's school, and telling my kid, here's something you can do after school? You know, last week, the mayor went to Boston to talk about his fight against drugs. Last week, for kids who might be moved into the drug life,
Thank you, Ms. Messenger.
additional after-school programs made sense. Apparently it makes sense when he proposes it, but not
Ms.
when I
Messenger,
do.
thank you. Next question is from Ms. Furtick, from Mr. Giuliani.
Mr. Giuliani, earlier tonight your opponent, Ruth Messenger, said you thought the 9.5% unemployment rate was a sign of the city's economic health. Do you think that's true? And also, why is the city's unemployment rate twice the national average?
Do I think that 9.5% unemployment is healthy? Do I look crazy? No, of course I don't think it's healthy. The fact is that unemployment was higher, however. Before I came into office, it was 10.5%, 11%, 11.5%. And there are things that are happening that are rectifying that. We went through a disaster between 1989 and 1993. We lost 320,000 private sector jobs. We hadn't had a job loss like that since the Depression. We have made up 170,000 of those jobs. Just to get back to where we were, there's 150,000 more jobs to go. And we lost those jobs because of policies and programs that were anti-business, anti-jobs, that drove jobs out of this city. We turned that around. This year, we've gained more jobs than at any time in the last 13 years. We've gained more jobs in the last 4 years in the private sector than any time in the history of the city, but we are coming out of a big hole. And I want to be mayor for the next 4 years because I'm not going to rest until we get every single job back that we lost during the Dinkins administration.
So
Thank
just
you.
as
And
a
then
follow-
more.
As a follow-up, then do you think that it's reasonable then to have 9.5% unemployment rate because 4 years wasn't long enough?
No, of course not. No unemployment rate is reasonable. I'm trying to explain to you the problem that we've inherited, the progress that we've made, which is very substantial, 170,000 jobs. We come out of a hole of having lost 320,000 jobs between 90 and 93. Now we've gained back 170,000 private sector jobs, which is the biggest job gain the city has had in any 4-year period. But it's not enough to make up for the losses that we sustained. If we continue with the policies and programs of the last
Thank you, Mr.
3.5 years, we're going to regain those jobs and still more,
Thank you.
and you'll see that unemployment rate come down.
Ms. Rodriguez.
9.5%, which is the official figure, which means a significantly larger layer of New Yorkers are without jobs, those who are not counted anymore because they've fallen, they cannot receive unemployment benefits anymore. Large layers of young people. The youth unemployment, especially among Black and Latino youth, remains appallingly high, over 20%. We need a massive public works program that will put people to work at union jobs. We don't need forms of indentured servitude like workfare. What we need is union jobs for all at union wages, and that can be done. We need to cut the work week from 30 to 30 hours with 40 hours pay and launch a program that will build the needed infrastructure, starting with housing, schools, transportation system, child care centers, and parks and recreation centers. There's a lot of building going on, but very little of it has anything to do with advancing
Ms.
the quality
Rodriguez.
of life of working people in this city.
Ms. Messenger.
Let's be clear, the mayor and his first deputy mayor both said rising unemployment is a sign of economic optimism. But in New York State and in the United States, where employment numbers are going up, unemployment is not. So the problem is specific to the city of New York. We have another specific unemployment problem. 2/3 of the private sector jobs that have been created have gone to people from the suburbs because New Yorkers turn out not to have the skills that are needed because they are being miseducated in our schools and in our colleges. This city needs a mayor now, in 1997, with an economic development program that is more than just corporate welfare. A program that, like the one I laid out yesterday, that will target small businesses, that will build job linkages for those businesses that are receiving city contracts, that will cut some business taxes, that will provide easier access to credit. We need a mayor who has a specific economic development program that is geared at job development. We do not need a mayor with an economic development corporation that has become a home for patronage employees, for relatives of city
Thank you, Ms.
lobbyists,
Messenger.
and for campaign workers.
Mr. Giuliani, 30-second rebuttal.
The record in gaining jobs over the last 3.5 years has been one of the best the city has had. And the reason for that is that we reversed a lot of policies, including policies of my political opponent. On 80 separate occasions, she voted to raise taxes. She voted to raise the hotel occupant tax, which was destroying the city. It was the highest in the world. We lost enormous numbers of jobs in hotels and restaurants as a result of it. And I had to work very, very hard my first year in office to get that hotel occupancy tax reduced. As a result of that, our tourism is at the highest levels, and we
Thank you,
have
Mr. Giuliani.
thousands more jobs in our restaurants and our hotels, and
Thank
we
you.
don't need to go back to
Mr.
the
Giuliani.
period where we were losing jobs.
Next question is from Mr. Kurtzman to Ms. Rodriguez.
Ms. Rodriguez, some of the poorest residents in this city rely upon the public hospitals, such as Harlem Hospital across the street. If you're elected mayor, will you continue the policy of the Giuliani administration to try to sell off or lease the city's public hospitals?
Love that question. No, I would not. I'm for public hospitals that are adequately staffed and that have all the most modern equipment. What is happening to medical care in this city, as it is in this country, is the poorest are being driven out of any form of medical care. We have a situation where you have to be, even on the job, many unions are now not able to do not have medical benefits, workers in unions. We have a large percentage of the working population in this country and the working poor, those people who are workers without jobs, or jobs that do pay, the kind of jobs that are created right now which pay minimum wage or are part-time labor, who do not have benefits of health. So we are for full medical care for all. I think that it's possible if a country like Cuba can provide medical care for its citizens despite the fact that it is an underdeveloped country, we can provide and should be able in the richest country in the world to provide free medical care for all.
Thank you. Ms. Messenger?
I would not pursue against every court order the continued effort to privatize the municipal hospital system. This administration's record on health care is simply appalling. We have a growing population of people who are uninsured, and yet Rudy has proposed cuts in child health care clinics, cuts in dental health care. He has cut $250 million from the municipal hospitals, laying off 1,600 doctors, nurses, and technicians. The major effort, which was supposed to be to recruit people into the city's managed Medicaid system, has been a failure, and families find themselves without access to care, without sufficient information about their benefits, and without any kind of quality assurance. I believe that this city needs indeed to make sure that its municipal hospitals keep pace with the rapid changes in healthcare delivery, needs to make the operation of those hospitals a great deal more efficient, needs to reduce the power of the central corporation. But we need municipal hospitals and a Department of Public Health to meet the healthcare needs of those people who have no coverage whatsoever.
Mr. Giuliani.
In the 4 years before I came into office, 6 of the 11 public hospitals in this city lost accreditation or partial accreditation. It was a disaster. We have 11 public hospitals that are acute care. All of them have been accredited during my administration. Waiting times for just about everything have been cut in half. For prenatal screening, used to be 9 days, it's now 4 days. The infant mortality rate last year was the lowest that it's been, and the first time below 1,000 in 100 years. And deaths for HIV and AIDS was the lowest in the country and down 30%. That's because we challenge the hospital system and don't allow it to be a big moribund monopoly. And you need privatization or the possibility of privatization to create that kind of energy in the system, to allow it to have good performance rather than the disaster that we inherited. Turning around a hospital system that had 6 hospitals that weren't accredited to a hospital system where all are accredited and waiting times are down.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani.
And by every indicator, people in this city are somewhat healthier now than they were then.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Privatization of the hospitals, like privatization of all the other infrastructure that working people fought to have public health and public hospitals, is part of the drive against our living standards, and it has to be fought. If we allow the further erosion of public health and public hospitals, working people as a whole will be faced with a situation we haven't faced since the 19th century without public care. And I am for, again, I repeat, for quality medical care that's free from womb to tomb for everyone who needs it, and it should be universal.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. It's now time for closing statements. And again, this was drawn earlier by lot, and the first statement will be from Ms. Messenger.
First, let me thank the Campaign Finance Board, the sponsors and participating press, the Schomburg Center, and most importantly, the people of New York for a chance to talk about what kind of city we can be as we move into the 21st century. Tonight, over and over again, Rudy Giuliani has told us that really every problem in this city is just about solved. Our schools are okay. Our unemployment situation is better than it was at some other time. He neglected to recognize that many of these problems are real for huge numbers of people who live in this city. I love this city, but I know that we have challenges, and I know that they need our attention. I don't understand how you boast about a reduction in waiting time for prenatal care visits when there are 10,000 fewer visits now than there were 4 years ago. You neglected to talk about the taxes and fees which you imposed on people, and the tuition increases, the water and sewer rate increases, the parking fine increases that are making people's wallets thinner. Rudy and I are different in more ways than you can count. I will fix our schools, he cut them. I will build our healthcare system, he tried to sell it off. I work to write this city's campaign finance laws, he breaks them. I would give our teachers a fair wage first, he gave pay raises to himself and his staff first. I believe we should identify $1 billion to put into our schools and into youth programs. Rudy wanted to give $1 billion to George Steinbrenner to move Yankee Stadium into Manhattan. He can't seem to find the money for education or hospitals or homeless and hungry people, but he's given away huge tax breaks, $800 million worth, to giant corporations. Rudy won't give the good cops who cut our crime rate a pay raise, and he won't do anything, as he's told you over and over again tonight, about independent monitoring of bad cops who abuse our citizens. I will do both. I am a Democrat, he is a Republican, and it shows. I am ready to tackle the problems in our schools, to improve education, to grow new business opportunities, and to end police brutality. This city can do better for its children and its working families. Join me, and we will have a city in the year 2000 that we can all be proud of.
Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez.
Malcolm X once said, and it was probably right here in Harlem, you can't make a chicken from a duck's egg. In response to the idea that you could end black oppression through supporting either the Democrats or Republicans. Every advance that working people have made, from Social Security, universal public education, the end of Jim Crow segregation, to our trade unions, just to name a few, comes from our struggles organized against the capitalist rulers and their politicians. The Socialist Workers Campaign advocates that working people chart a political course independent of the Democratic and Republican parties, a course that relies on the use of our own collective power organized through our trade unions and mass actions in the streets. The capitalists face growing social, political, and economic instability. Social polarization is giving rise to rightist currents and fascist organizations. Stiff opposition from workers and farmers in every country to the capitalist austerity, including in the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, is the order of the day. It is this instability, the sharpening competition among the imperialist power for markets, that's driving imperialism towards war and fascism. The resistance is a crucial part of preparations by workers for bigger battles on the horizon to defend our historic gains and the future generations of our class. Ultimately, only a successful struggle by workers and farmers to take the power out of their hands will prevent them from visiting the horrors of another world war on us. If elected, I will not organize to manage their crisis. Instead, I'll use this office, as I've used my campaign, to help mobilize workers and youth and the oppressed to press forward on our demands. Please join me and others this Sunday in the important protest at the United Nations against the bipartisan attacks on immigrant rights. Just as my campaign stood with the UPS strikers, I pledge to stand on the side of any city worker who strikes for a decent contract, and will march with any picketer against attacks on big business.
Thank you. Mr. Giuliani.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you to all of the people who have organized this debate. I'm just not going to let this negativism get me down. The fact is that New York City had a tremendous number of problems. It continues to have a tremendous number of problems. But we're doing better now. We're making progress. We're seeing crime reduced more than any other city in America. We're getting national attention for that, and our people are safer for it. We're seeing jobs come back, not as fast as I would like. I'd like to get back all of those jobs, and I'm the kind of person that'd like to get them back tomorrow. But I'd like the next 4 years to get the rest of them back for us. And our schools have a long way to go. It's been years and years and years of neglect. Ruth Messenger came into politics 20 years ago to straighten out the schools, and she did nothing about it. In 4 years, we've changed governance. We've brought about school-based budgeting. We have a chancellor who's taking on corrupt and incompetent school boards and removing superintendents who aren't doing the jobs. And we're beginning, I emphasize beginning, to see progress. Reading scores up, math scores up, and problems being addressed so that the money is going to the classrooms and the schools. And we have bigger challenges ahead, really bigger challenges. If we're going to make progress, we haven't talked enough about this, we have to remove drugs from our neighborhoods and from our schools, because it is preventing us from making the kind of progress that we really need to make. It's the one real fear that I have, that this city could slip back into the kind of crime that we had in the early 1990s. There's a big difference. Ruth Messenger prefers the policies of the Dinkins administration, of the 4 years before I came into office, wants to go back to most of them. I prefer the progress that we've made together as a city, that now is having us written about as a national model rather than the rotting apple. I want to move ahead, seeing the problems that we have realistically, and I see them, and I want to see that opportunity spread, and I want to see those dreams for the people who haven't had those dreams yet and haven't had that opportunity. And I'd like you to give me, together, the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Hold your applause, please. That ends tonight's debate among 3 candidates for mayor. On behalf of WNYC Radio, El Diario La Prensa, New York One, and the New York Urban League, I want to take the opportunity to thank the candidates and you, our audience. Candidates who polls determine to be the leading contenders will debate once more in late October. The deadline to register to vote is tomorrow, and polls will be open on November 4th at 6 a.m. and close at 9 p.m. Exercise your right and vote. Thank you and good night.